Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Welcome to the bonus show. I have a story about George Lucas. George Lucas is, I believe he's a billionaire. Basically just because of, it started out because of the merchandising from Star Wars. I guess the production companies just kind of thought the movie wouldn't do that well and was kind of a joke. And when George Lucas said he wanted all merchandising rights, they kind of laughed and were like, yeah, whatever. Boom, billionaire. But George Lucas wanted to build a sound studio in Marin County, California. This is an interesting place because it is one of the richest areas in the nation per capita. The median income is about $91,000. 7.7% of people in Marin County live below the poverty line. The national average is about $52,000 and 14% living below the poverty line. So it's full of millionaires, and they fought very hard to make sure that this studio, film studio or sound studio, I don't know, one of the two, interchangeable really when it comes to Lucas. They fought very hard to have this blocked, and they were successful. Now, Lucas still owns the land here, and what he decided to do after this was blocked was build a whole bunch of affordable housing right near all these millionaires, and they are furious. I guess he's going to build about 224 units, 1 to 3 bedroom. I guess it sounds pretty nice. There's going to be terraced gardens, a pool, a micro farm, an orchard, or a community garden, a barn, and it's going to be quite a project. And there's a whole lot of outrage here now, but it seems like this will be much harder to stop than the film studio was. What are your thoughts on this?
I agree. It's going to be harder to stop. It is fascinating. This serves a social good. And I'm generally not the type of person that looks to do things just to anger other people. But when you have a very specific situation where you feel that someone is already in the wrong, I mean, this is obviously hilarious. And I think it's just a very interesting way that he's using his money. And George Lucas has actually been known to donate a huge amount of money. I mean, just insane amounts of money to education and to, I believe, some other causes that for him are worthwhile, and I would agree are worthwhile. And yeah, I mean, this when you see someone use their money to do something like this instead of trying to buy a senator, for example, it gives you a completely different view of wealth, doesn't it?
It really does. Lucas, when he sold Star Wars to Disney, it was the sale was, I don't know how much, it was in the billions of dollars, and he just donated all of it to education. Of course, yeah, I think he realizes, what am I going to do with that billion? He couldn't spend that money if he tried. So anyway, I may not be a huge fan of his directing, although I do like the Star Wars series. But yeah, this isn't. He says it's not about getting revenge. You know, this is an area that, if depending on what you do for work and your situation, could be very difficult to live in. And so I think this is actually a good thing. And there are some quotes here from people who, of course, wanted to remain anonymous. And I think we can all predict what I'm about to read here. But I guess the Lucas Valley Estates Homeowners Association, which represents houses nearest to the Lucas property, has received dozens of these letters. Carl Frick, a member of the board, told the New York Times that we got letters saying, you guys are going to get what you deserve. You're going to bring drug dealers, all this crime and lowlife in here. Another man who remained anonymous called Lucas an asshole and said he would prefer that nothing be built on this 1,000 acres. And, if I lived there, I wouldn't want anything built there either. I'd rather just look at a nice piece of land. But, whatever. Can't fault the guy for that. But, what is he really saying? Another person said that he's inciting class warfare. That may be true. but he's not really inciting it. It's just going to happen anyway. Sheer terror was one term described by a woman who feared for her safety, likening the whole thing to Syria. Yes. Syria, Marin County. Syria, Marin County.
And I think, just so you know, it's pronounced Marin.
Marin?
Yeah.
Is it?
As far as I know.
I remember hearing Marin, but it could be Marin. Whatever. Marin has a nicer ring to it. This is, of course, the what the millionaires are saying. But go George Lucas. Way to stick it to the man, even though you are kind of the man. But good stuff. A great trolling effort by George Lucas. The man is not the world's most brilliant director, but he is brilliant. I give him that. Okay, some disturbing news here coming to us from the auto industry. What's happening is that, as you all know, computers are increasingly becoming a part of our vehicles. And like we talked about, eventually computers may drive them. But there are several car companies that are trying to prohibit us from making alterations to certain computer components of our cars. The Digital Millennium Copyright Act has been around for a while, and it's basic, for the most part, an anti-internet piracy bill. Automakers are trying to use it to make working on your own car illegal. And it, like I said, it is just computer-related components, but they are coming up with all sorts of ridiculous reasons for why they want this. Well, we know why they don't want people modifying the cars, because they feel that somehow it will affect their bottom line, or that perhaps, I guess this would still affect their bottom line, but if someone makes an alteration to the computer that ends up in some type of weird accident because of it, they could be sued for it. But they are making up some ridiculous excuses. John Deere argued that John Deere makes tractors and other farming equipment. They argued that letting people modify car computer systems will result in them pirating music through the onboard entertainment system. This is an example of some of the bullshit they are coming up with to try and sneak this into the legislation. Now, I'm going to go ahead, Dave.
No, I didn't have anything
to list the car companies that are behind this. So GM, BMW, FCA US, Ford, Jaguar Land Rover, Mazda, Mercedes-Benz USA, Mitsubishi, Porsche, Toyota, Volkswagen Group of America, Volvo Cars of North America. All of these companies are behind it. Tesla is not. So just to give you an idea of what types of companies support this. Go ahead.
Okay, I didn't have anything specific I was trying to interrupt, but I guess you're pausing. I was going to say, this is similar to something that went on within the 3D printer industry, which is that some 3D printer companies were originally completely open source, and then eventually they said, actually, now we're not going to be open source, typically when investment money came in. And it's the idea that you own the 3D printer unit, but you don't really own the technology in it. You don't have the right, seemingly, to actually play with the technology in it. And it's a similar idea with a car. Yeah, you buy the car, but there's almost like intellectual property within the car that you don't own and you're not allowed to touch. And increasingly this is so that you have to go to repair shops that are dealer repair shops. Obviously the manufacturer prefers for you to go to, using factory parts as opposed to aftermarket equivalents. And this is all, it's mostly a money thing. It's almost exclusively a money thing.
It is. And it's interesting you bring that up, right? Many of these cars have, let's use GM as an example. Okay, GM has patents on much of the technology in their cars, intellectual property. And of course, we can talk about the problems with the patent system. But Tesla, on the other hand, has already released many of their own patents just to advance the technology and to advance electric cars. I think you'd be hard pressed to to find one patent that had been released by a company like GM. So different mentalities with different car companies for sure. And these car companies are making the argument that you do not own your car, that you are kind of borrowing it. That is part of their argument here. And it's sad. That's what it is. What was that? Before we left Massachusetts, there was a vote. And I think it was that had the vote passed, it would have been illegal for independent garages to work on cars in a certain way. They had to be worked on at the dealerships. What was that?
I don't remember the specifics, and I don't know that I just don't remember. I remember that there was something about a right to repair type of thing.
Yeah.
But I don't remember the specifics.
I mean, what I remember is that it was a fucking abomination. And that, first of all, there was no way it would pass in Massachusetts, but it was clearly just about car dealerships making more money. And it was car dealerships that, of course, got it put on the ballot in the first place. It was just, it was sickening. That's what it was. All right, Ozzy Osbourne. I've talked about Ozzy before, and I have talked about how, despite decades and decades of legendary substance abuse, that his liver and that his internal organs, and even his mind are in pretty good shape, and no one really knew why. The answer, of course, lies in his DNA, and he is going to have his genome mapped because of this. Scientists want to figure out why he is still alive. And they are going to map his genome to try and figure it out. And I'm very curious to see what happens here. We talked recently about modifying children, about, genomics and customizing your children at the most fundamental level. Now it seems like if we figure this out, you could be able to edit your child so that even if they abuse drugs and alcohol their whole lives, assuming they don't overdose, they will be okay. But is that a good thing?
I don't know. I don't want to talk too much about the good thing or not part, because I've been researching a follow-up story, because a few people, I'll kind of tease what we're going to talk about, said to me after that story about genetically modifying embryos, hey, David, if genetically modifying embryos becomes a reliable technology that can be used to make people not predisposed to certain diseases, would it not become immoral not to make those modifications? And I think that's an interesting question, which we'll get to. But in the short term, it would be fascinating to know what exactly is going on in Ozzy Osbourne's body that has made it so that, now, to say that he hasn't been damaged by these things, doesn't he have, isn't a lot of his speech issue related to the abuse of drugs and alcohol?
I think no. He was diagnosed with like a Parkinsonian disorder, and I think it's neurological, and I think it has nothing to do with his substance abuse. Shockingly, I'm pretty sure that's the case there. And so he's not the only one. You could probably do Keith Richards as well, and there are others. But Ozzy, I think, is a good example, and I'm sure he would like to find this out as well. Very few full human genomes have been sequenced. It's very expensive right now, and eventually, I guess it will probably be pretty cheap and ubiquitous. But as it stands, it's outrageously expensive, and so that's why it has not been done to many people. But this is a good one. Let's find out why he is basically invincible when it comes to substance abuse.
Yeah,
it is really incredible. Lemmy from Motorhead, I think, is also one of those people who insane substance abuse and eating poorly pretty much his whole life. There's something there genetically happening, and it's incredible. Absolutely incredible. Anything to add today?
Nothing today.
All right, big announcement coming up. Big announcement. We're not sure when the announcement is going to be, but it is going to be this week. We can say that with certitude. Stay tuned.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.